Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, Sophie and Kirsty are going to be having a conversation about some of the pros and cons and technicalities of choosing to train less than full time. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel so that you never miss any new content.
So Sophie, what is less than full-time training?
It's kind of as it sounds. You work a smaller proportion of your contracted hours in comparison to what's called a whole-time equivalent. So at the moment, most people in a whole-time equivalent are contracted to work about 40 hours. And if you go less than full-time, you work a proportion of that. So for example, 60 or 80%. Anyone in training can apply for it, and there's a number of reasons why people go less than full-time. Some reasons that people might go less than full-time include things like childcare or caring commitments, so they need to be at home more often to provide those. You might go less than full-time for personal health reasons. For example, if you had a long-term health problem that meant working a full-time contract wasn't something that you could manage because of your physical fitness or ability, that you could go less than full-time. Some people go less than full-time because they got extracurricular commitments. So if they're doing a leadership program or a teaching program, then they might need to go less than full-time to accommodate some of those things that they're doing in their spare time. There's a pilot scheme currently ongoing at the moment where some people are going less than full-time simply because they want to change their work-life balance. But that's something that the colleges are examining whether or not they want to take that up long-term.
So what does that mean for my working hours?
So your current whole-time equivalent would be about 40 hours a week. And if you go less than full-time, it will reduce the number of hours you have to work. So for example, you might do 4 8-hour days or 2 12-hour days and an 8-hour day to make up your 32 hours a week for 80%. When you go to 60%, you cut down to about 24 hours a week, which would equate to probably 2 12-hour shifts or 3 8-hour shifts. So it does make quite significant cuts in the number of days you'll be working in an average week. However, it is done usually as an average overall. So you might still have some weeks where you're working more shifts than your contracted hours and have more 0 days back to compensate for that over the course of your placement. Out of hours is probably negotiable with your employer. If you have caring commitments, for example, then you might not be able to do night shifts or weekends because there's not the same availability of things like nurseries or carers to come in and relieve you. And some people, if they're doing it for health reasons, they might not feel comfortable working out of hours shifts as well. It's done on a very individual basis. And I think it's important to remember that you get quite a lot of doing out of hours working in terms of different decision making, different skill mixes. So it's worth considering whether out-of-hours working will work for you, but have a chat with your employer when you're discussing your less than full-time contract to make sure you get the right mix of in-hours and out-of-hours working.
And what does it mean financially?
So you'll take a proportional cut in your pay with the number of hours that you're working. So your salary will decrease by 80%, 60% based on your less than full-time. If you don't do an out-of-hours commitment, you might also lose your banding. So you might go to a plain unbanded salary, but that might not be as much of a drop as you think because we usually pay quite a lot of tax. So you might not get as big a drop in your salary by going less than full-time as you're expecting. It may not be the full drop to 80 or 60% because of the way the tax will change. For more information about pay, have a look at our pay video on In the Mess.
And how does it affect training?
So that can be a little bit variable. In general, our training is competency-based rather than time-based. So you will still have an ARCP every year.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
To check how you're progressing, but you're not expected to progress the same way that a whole-time trainee would. Because you'll be working proportionally less shifts than your whole-time equivalent colleagues, you will have fewer clinical experiences, but if you can fill your curriculum and your portfolio, you may still be able to progress through your training more quickly than you're expecting. However, if you're going into a less than full-time training program, it's probably worth expecting to take longer to do your training. For example, if you went 80%, a 3-year training program might become a 3 years and 9 months training program. This can put you a little bit out of sync with other people, so you might not have your ARCP every June, the way that it happens if you're in program running in sync with everybody else. And you might need to take some time between the start of training programs in August if you finish your program out of sync with everybody else. But that's something to have a chat with your training program director and educational supervisor about so you know what the year is going to look like for you between ARCPs. It's important to remember that your study leave and your annual leave is pro rata, which means it's calculated based on the hours that you work. So you still get study leave and you still get annual leave as a less than full-time trainee, but it might be fewer days than if you were whole-time. And it should be a proportional number of days. So for example, if you get 28 days of annual leave as a full-time trainee, then you would get 80% of that as an 80% trainee and 60% as a 60% trainee. But you should still be getting your annual leave and your study leave as part of your training. So you can still take locum shifts as a less than full-time trainee, but you have to bear in mind whether that's something you feel like you're able to do. If you've got caring commitments and your caring commitments are fulfilled on those days, then fine. If you're less than full-time for personal or health reasons, then just make sure that you're not overworking because you don't want to become fatigued and burnt out.
How do I go less than full-time?
So you can go less than full-time at any point during a training contract. Some people enter their training programs less than full-time if they know that they're going to have reasons that they need to be less than full-time. But you can go less than full-time when you're already in program as well. To do that, you just need to have a chat with your training program director and probably the postgraduate dean or associate postgraduate dean in your deanery and discuss the reasons why you want to go less than full-time. There's often some paperwork to fill out. And if you're doing that, it can sometimes take 4 to 8 weeks to make the changes to the rota and the adjustments to your salary to fulfil the less than full-time training commitments. So just give them a bit of advance notice and try and work that in. If you're starting a new training program in a new area, get in touch with them in advance so that you can make the arrangements before you start your job. Details for your training program director and associate postgraduate dean can be found on the internet. Remember, in general, it's better to have trainees who are working less than full-time but progressing through their training than to have trainees who are having to take time out or losing trainees from training altogether. So people are often quite happy to have less than full-time trainees in the department if it keeps them part of the team.
Thanks, Sophie. That's been really helpful. I think you've covered a lot of the common questions that people have about less than full-time training.
No, I think it's something that's really worth discussing because there's a lot of myths out there, so I'm happy to go through that. Feel free to leave comments on the channel below the video and we'll get back to you. And if you've got any ideas for further videos, pop them below and we'll see what we can do. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a thing.